Close your eyes. Let the noise of the present fade away, and step with me into a world before steel, before wheels, before written words. A world where for 3 million years humanity survived with nothing more than stone, fire, and will. This was the Stone Age, a span of time so vast it makes the whole of recorded history seem like a heartbeat. A world where men and women moved across endless landscapes with sharp flakes of flint in their hands, where survival depended not on wealth or empire, but on skill, instinct, and an intimacy with nature that modern eyes can barely imagine. For 3 million years, no gold, no iron, no bronze glittered in their fires. Only the hard edge of stone cracked against bone, the spark of flint kissed into flame, the sound of voices calling through forests and plains. Think of it. Generation after generation born and gone, never knowing what metal was, yet carving, cutting, shaping entire lives, with stone tools that were simple in form but revolutionary in impact. Hunters tracked animals through dust and snow. Gatherers carried knowledge of plants like living libraries. Fires glowed in caves where shadows told stories long before words were written. And through it all, humanity endured. Fragile, yet unbreakable. Stay with this thought, because I will soon reveal how these stone tools were not just weapons, but symbols of survival. How fire was not merely warmth, but memory itself. And how this age, though primitive to our eyes, laid the foundation for everything that came after. For now, let yourself drift into the vastness of this forgotten world, where 3 million years passed in silence, and yet in that silence, humanity learned the art of surviving without metal, an art we will now uncover, piece by piece. They say the story of humanity truly began not with words, not with cities, but with the sound of stone striking stone, the sharp crack of a flake breaking away, leaving behind an edge keen enough to cut flesh, scrape hide, or carve wood, and, in that simple act of shaping rock, the first spark of human ingenuity was lit. Long before spears of bronze or swords of iron, our ancestors crouched at riverbanks with cobbles in their hands, experimenting, failing, learning, until a chipped fragment revealed itself to be sharper than claws, more durable than teeth, and from that moment, survival took a new path. With stone, meat could be stripped from bone, hides could be cleaned for warmth, roots could be dug from hard soil, and even predators could be challenged. This was not invention in the way we know it, not a single genius moment, but a slow awakening, carried through countless lifetimes, as knowledge passed wordlessly from parent to child, gesture to gesture, a memory carved not into books, but into practice. And yet, these tools were not only practical, they were a key to imagination, for in their edges lay the possibility of change, the realization that the world could be reshaped by human hands. Stay with this thought, because later I will reveal how these same stones became more than tools, how they turned into symbols, sacred objects held with reverence, proof that survival was not just instinct, but intention. For now, picture how life unfolded around them. Families huddled in caves, sparks of fire flickering against walls while sharp flakes lay scattered on the ground. Hunters walking across endless savannas with nothing but stone tips bound to wooden shafts. Mothers teaching children the patient rhythm of striking one stone against another, building in them the muscle memory of survival. The landscape itself was the great teacher. Rivers offering smooth pebbles, cliffs breaking into flint, and with every discovery, humanity inched forward, not quickly, not dramatically, but persistently, across thousands upon thousands of years. In that persistence lay the secret of our species. For even without metal, without writing, without cities, humans were already shaping a legacy through patience, adaptability, and the quiet genius of stone. And the true mystery remains this: how did such simplicity endure for nearly 3 million years, longer than any empire, longer than any invention since? The answer hides in what came next, in the fire that danced beside the stone, a story I will reveal soon, for that flame turned tools into power and survival into destiny. If stone was the first tool, then fire was the first magic. And to understand the Stone Age, you must step into the night of 1 million years ago, when the earth was darker, colder, and more dangerous than we can imagine, when predators' eyes glowed in the shadows and storms rolled over open plains with no shelter but caves and trees. And in that world, one small spark changed everything. At first it was borrowed, not made. Flames stolen from lightning strikes, from volcanic eruptions, from the smouldering remains of wildfires, and kept alive with trembling hands, guarded like treasure. For once it died, it could not be rekindled, until chance offered it again. But over time, through patient experimentation, through the rhythm of striking flint against stone, our ancestors learned to create fire at will. And in that moment, the balance of survival shifted forever. Fire was more than warmth, more than light. It was protection, the great barrier that drove away beasts with its smoke and glow, a shield against the claws and fangs that once stalked humanity without fear. Fire was nourishment, turning raw meat into cooked meals that could be digested more easily, unleashing energy that fueled bigger brains and longer journeys. Fire was community, the heart of the night where families gathered, where stories were spoken, where shadows danced on cave walls, and imagination began to stretch into something greater than mere survival. Stay close to this thought, because I will later tell you how fire became more than a tool, how it became a teacher, shaping culture, language, and memory itself. But pause for now at the image of those ancient nights. The crackle of branches breaking in flames, the smell of roasted meat, the warmth on cold faces, and above, the endless dome of stars watched by eyes that wondered what they meant. With fire came possibility. Wood hardened into spears, stones heated to crack more easily, landscapes transformed as humans learned to burn grasslands and drive herds of animals toward their traps. Fire was not just survival, it was strategy, and strategy was the beginning of something larger. A mind not just reacting but planning, shaping, altering the earth itself. Yet with fire also came fear, for its power could not always be controlled, and a blaze too strong could consume shelters, forests, even entire valleys, leaving behind both devastation and awe. In this paradox, humanity learned respect, for the same flame that offered life could take it away in moments. And here lies the secret I will disclose later. That fire did not only change the body, giving warmth and food, but it changed the mind, expanding memory, deepening thought, pushing humans closer toward what we would one day call civilization. Think of it, millions of years, lived not with iron or steel, not with machines or engines, but with nothing more than stone in the hand and fire at the center of the night. And yet, it was enough. Enough to survive ice ages, enough to drive back predators, enough to spread across continents, enough to light the path that every invention afterward would follow. Fire was not the end of the Stone Age, but it was its heartbeat, steady and eternal. carrying humans through dangers we cannot fully picture. And though metal would one day surpass it, though electricity and engines would one day dwarf its glow, the truth is that without fire, the Stone Age would not have lasted 3 million years, and humanity might not have lasted at all. Survival in the Stone Age was not a comfortable existence, but a daily negotiation with death. And to picture it, you must see the endless rhythm of hunting and gathering, a way of life so ancient that it defined humanity for more than 99% of our history, where every sunrise brought a question with no guaranteed answer. Would there be food today or not? Men and women walked vast distances, their feet hardened to the earth, scanning for tracks in the mud, broken branches. In the undergrowth, the faint smell of animals carried by the wind, each clue a puzzle piece in the hunt, with sharpened stone blades and wooden spears hardened in fire. Small groups surrounded great beasts, knowing one misstep could mean trampling hooves or piercing horns, yet also knowing that without the hunt, children would starve, fires would grow cold. To kill a mammoth or bison was more than a meal. It was a triumph of strategy, teamwork, and daring, proof that fragile humans could stand against giants. But hunting alone did not sustain them. Gathering was the quieter, steadier art, the knowledge of roots, berries, nuts, and herbs. Knowledge passed through countless generations until it became almost instinct, an invisible thread of wisdom binding families to the land. A single mistake in choosing a plant could mean death, so mothers and grandmothers carried in their minds an unbroken library of the edible, and the poisonous, the nourishing, and the healing. And in this hidden knowledge lay the true foundation of survival. Stay with me here, because soon I will reveal how these practices were not only about food, but about culture itself, about rituals, traditions, and the birth of human memory. For now, think of the daily struggle, children learning to dig tubers with sharpened sticks, hunters crouched in tall grass waiting for a chance to strike, women weaving baskets to carry fruits and seeds, every member of the group playing their part in the cycle of survival. And even in scarcity, there was creativity, traps dug into the earth, stones set as markers, simple snares crafted with vines. The earth was both enemy and ally, offering bounty one day and famine the next, forcing humans to become wanderers, always moving, always adapting, following the migrations of herds, the seasons of growth, the rivers that promised fish and fresh water. There were no permanent homes, no cities of stone, only camps that rose and vanished like breath. But in this impermanence lay resilience, for to survive, humans had to become the most adaptable of all creatures. And this adaptability was the seed of everything that would come later, the quiet genius that whispered through ages, change or perish. It was not metal that allowed them to endure, not wealth or empire, but skill, patience, and a fierce intimacy with the land itself. And perhaps the most powerful survival tool of all was not stone, not fire, but cooperation, for no one could endure alone. The tribe was the shield, the family the fortress, and through shared labor, shared food, shared danger, humanity became something greater than the sum of its parts. This was not yet civilization, but it was the foundation of civilization. And the story of how we survived without metal is, in truth, the story of how we survived together. And the most haunting question of all remains: how did this fragile balance last for millions of years, longer than any empire, longer than any invention since? The answer lies ahead, in the whispers of art and spirit, in the caves where hands left their prints on stone walls, a mystery I will soon unveil. If survival gave humans their bodies, then imagination gave them their souls. And nowhere is this more visible than in the secret chambers of caves, where flickering firelight revealed shapes painted on stone, colors pressed from earth and blood, lines drawn by hands that sought not just to live, but to remember, to leave behind something more permanent than breath. And here lies the most haunting clue of all, that in the darkness of the Stone Age, when tools were still crude and lives short, the human mind had already begun to dream. The paintings of bison, deer, and wild horses are not mere decorations, but windows into thought, records of hunts yet to come, rituals of hope, or perhaps prayers whispered to unseen spirits. For what reason would fragile tribes risk precious time and energy in deep caverns where light barely reached, unless they believed in something greater than the hunt itself? Stay with this question, for I will soon reveal how these acts were not about art as we know it, but about survival in a different sense, about belief, cohesion, and identity. Handprints on stone walls are the earliest signatures, as if to declare, we were here, we existed, we mattered. Around fires, words began to take shape, sounds became symbols, and stories were told of ancestors, animals, and gods not yet named. Stories that bound groups together in a world otherwise ruled by chaos. Death, once a silent end, began to carry meaning, for graves from the Stone Age show care and ritual, beads laid with the dead, flowers placed near the bones, as though humans could not accept that life simply vanished. This was the birth of spirituality, the trembling first step toward religion, toward myth, toward the search for something beyond the physical. And think of the power of this change. Until this moment, survival was only about food and shelter, but now it was also about meaning, about asking why. The stars became messages, the earth a living force, animals sacred partners in the cycle of existence. Firelight cast shadows on cave walls, and those shadows stirred imagination, birthing creatures of myth, heroes of memory, gods of stone and sky. In those long nights, with no metal, no cities, and no writing, humanity still carried the greatest weapon of all, the ability to believe in what cannot be seen. And belief was survival, for it gave courage against fear, unity against despair, purpose against emptiness. These rituals and symbols were not luxuries, but anchors, holding fragile communities together through winters, famines, and storms. Without them, tribes would fracture, and the species might have withered away. So when we ask how humans survived 3 million years without metal, the answer is not only stone and fire, not only hunting and gathering, but this: the mind's leap into imagination, the refusal to be bound only by what is visible. And though later ages would forge swords and build temples, though empires would rise with metal and fall with dust, the Stone Age mind had already discovered the secret they all depended on: the power of stories. And in this lies the greatest irony, that while stone tools have long been buried and fires long extinguished, the paintings, the rituals, the myths remain, whispering across tens of thousands of years, telling us that long before civilization, long before iron and bronze, humans had already touched eternity. The Stone Age was not bound to one land or one climate, but stretched across the entire globe, for humanity carried within it a restless fire that refused to stay still. And from the plains of Africa, our ancestors began a journey unlike any other, a journey that would take them to deserts, mountains, frozen tundras, and islands lost in endless seas. A migration that spanned tens of thousands of years and reshaped the earth itself. Picture small bands of hunter-gatherers moving across savannas, following rivers northward, their bare feet pressing into soil that no human had ever walked before, carrying with them only tools of stone, fire carried in embers, and the knowledge of the land learned through countless generations. Step by step, they left behind Africa, crossing into the Middle East, branching into Europe, Asia, and eventually beyond, confronting environments so hostile they might have crushed any lesser creature, yet humans endured. In the frozen north, where mammoths roamed and winters bit with killing cold, they crafted clothing from furs, shelters from bone and hide, fires dug deep into the earth to trap warmth. In deserts where the sun scorched the ground, they walked by starlight and mapped the sky as a guide. In forests thick with danger, they learned the voices of birds, the movements of predators, the taste of every root and leaf. Stay with this, because soon I will reveal the most haunting truth of all, that every step of this migration was not just survival, but transformation. For each land shaped its people, altering their bodies, their languages, their stories, weaving diversity into the very fabric of humanity. In time, they reached the farthest corners of the earth, the icy land bridge into the Americas, the vast Pacific, where canoes carried explorers across unthinkable distances, islands where survival meant fishing in endless oceans. Each environment demanded invention, each new world a challenge that forced humans to adapt again and again without the aid of metal, only with stone, bone, wood, and above all, cooperation. And it was in this spreading out that humanity truly became a global species, scattering seeds of culture and memory across continents. No empire could yet exist, no cities could yet rise, but already the foundations of the future were being laid, with every fire lit in a new land, every camp raised in unfamiliar soil. And here lies the paradox. Though fragile in body, humans were unbreakable in spirit, capable of walking out of Africa with almost nothing, and through sheer endurance, claiming the entire planet. It is perhaps the most extraordinary migration in history, and yet it is also the least remembered, for it left no monuments of stone, no temples or fortresses, only faint footprints in the sand, bones buried beneath ice, tools scattered in forgotten caves. But these whispers are enough, for they tell us a truth more profound than any empire ever could, that long before metal, long before machines, humanity had already proven its destiny, not as rulers of one land, but as wanderers of the earth itself, bound not by walls but by journeys, not by conquest, but by survival. And so, the great migration of the Stone Age remains one of the most astonishing achievements in the human story, a testament to the power of adaptability, imagination, and unity that carried fragile tribes across continents and into eternity. Daily life in the Stone Age was a rhythm of endurance, a cycle of light and dark, hunger and satisfaction, danger and safety, repeated for millions of years. And yet within that simple rhythm lay the secret of survival. Every dawn was a call to action, the tribe rising with the sun, men and women preparing for the hunt, gathering or protecting the camp, children learning by watching, imitating every movement with small hands, because knowledge could not be written, it had to be lived. Food was the central pulse, the anchor of existence, and to find it meant reading the land like a map, tracking animal prints in soft earth, listening for the rustle of prey in tall grass, knowing which berries nourished and which poisoned. When the hunt succeeded, it was not just meat that came back to camp, but survival itself, the kill shared among all, roasted over fire, bones cracked open for marrow, skins stretched into clothing and shelters. And yet when hunts failed, hunger gnawed, bodies weakened, and the fragile balance of life hung by a thread, reminding every tribe that tomorrow was never guaranteed. Shelter was built not from stone and metal, but from what the land offered. Branches woven into huts, hides stretched into tents, caves claimed as sanctuaries where fire smoked against ceilings marked with ancient drawings. Nights were filled with stories told around flames, elders passing down memory of ancestors, hunters recounting battles with beasts, mothers humming lullabies that carried both comfort and warning. Danger was never far. Predators stalked in shadows, storms broke without warning, rivers swelled into floods, sickness struck without cure. And yet in the face of all this, families clung together, tribes forming tight bonds that became the essence of survival. Cooperation was the weapon sharper than stone, for without unity, no tribe could last. And in this shared struggle, humans found strength not only in muscle, but in love, care, and sacrifice. For when one fell ill, others gathered food. When one was lost, the tribe mourned. When a child was born, the group celebrated as though hope itself had returned. This daily life, though harsh, was the forge in which humanity's resilience was shaped. A life of scarcity that created abundance of spirit. And though there were no walls of cities, no crowns or kings, no riches of gold or silver, there was a wealth that carried humanity forward. Knowledge, memory, cooperation, and the fire of survival that burned through countless generations. Though the Stone Age is often remembered for its simple tools of flint and obsidian, it was also an age of boundless creativity, a time when invention was not luxury but necessity, when every new idea carved the difference between life and death, and so slowly, painfully, humanity crafted the first technologies that would echo across all of history. The stone axe and flake were only the beginning. Soon came needles of bone to stitch hides into clothing, harpoons to pierce fish, bows and arrows to strike prey from a distance, grinding stones to crush seeds into meal, and containers made of hollowed wood, woven reeds, or baked clay to hold water and food. Each invention was born not in workshops, but in the wilderness, tested not in comfort, but against hunger, cold, and fear. And yet, what makes this story astonishing is not just the tools themselves, but the mind that made them, for in shaping stone, bone, and wood, humans were shaping thought itself, discovering that imagination could reach beyond survival. In time, they began painting on cave walls, mixing ochre and charcoal to leave behind animals, handprints, and abstract shapes, images that had no practical purpose, and yet carried deep meaning, perhaps spiritual, perhaps symbolic, a hint that invention was no longer only about survival, but also about identity and memory. Stay with this, because soon I will reveal how these small sparks of imagination were the seeds of culture, of art, of the very civilization that would come millennia later. For now, picture the awe of a child watching a hunter draw a bow, the string singing as the arrow flew. Imagine a woman sharpening a stone blade smooth enough to slice skin into fine strips for rope. Think of a family eating from a clay pot hardened by fire, a technology so simple yet so revolutionary that it changed the way food was stored and shared. These inventions spread slowly, tribe to tribe, across rivers and valleys, not as trade in the modern sense, but as shared knowledge, each group adapting and transforming ideas to their own environment. It was this ability to innovate and pass innovation onward that set humans apart, more than strength, more than speed, more than claws or teeth. Invention became our true weapon, our true shield, the invisible thread carrying us from stone flakes to space flight, though at this early stage, no one knew where it would lead. Yet the evidence survives, in painted caves, in carved figurines, in beads of bone and shell worn as ornaments, proof that humans were already thinking beyond survival, reaching for beauty, for meaning, for something greater than the hunt. And that is perhaps the greatest invention of all. The idea that life was not only about enduring, but about expressing, remembering, and dreaming. A shift that turned survival into story and gave humanity the power to create not just tools, but a legacy that still surrounds us today. For millions of years, animals were both the greatest threat and the greatest gift to humankind, shaping every rhythm of survival in the Stone Age. For in their movements lay food, in their hides lay warmth, in their bones lay tools, and yet in their eyes also glimmered danger, predators whose teeth and claws tested the limits of human endurance. The story of humans and animals is one of struggle, respect, dependence, and eventually companionship. But in these early ages, it was a fragile dance of fear and reverence. To hunt a mammoth was to face a mountain of muscle and fury. A single misstep meaning death beneath trampling feet. And yet to succeed meant survival for weeks, perhaps months, for the whole tribe. Deer and bison became moving feasts across plains, while fish and birds provided steady sustenance where rivers and forests gave their bounty. But the predator's shadow was never far. Lions, leopards, and saber-toothed cats stalked the same. Herds, humans hunted. Wolves prowled the edges of firelight. Crocodiles lurked in dark waters. And yet, humans learned not only to fear, but to study them, tracking migrations, imitating calls, reading footprints, deciphering the world through animal behavior. This intimate observation grew into something greater, for in time, the sharp line between hunter and hunted began to blur. Wolves, once feared, crept close to human camps, drawn by scraps of food and the warmth of fire, and somewhere in that long, silent interaction a bond was formed, tentative at first, but slowly deepening, until wolf became partner, protector, and eventually, dog, the first domesticated animal. This moment was more than survival. It was the beginning of a friendship that would shape all of human history, a partnership built on trust, loyalty, and shared struggle. Stay with this thought, for soon I will reveal how this bond with animals extended further into the herding of goats, sheep, and cattle, laying the foundation of agriculture itself. But even before herds were tamed, animals held a spiritual weight, painted on cave walls in vivid strokes of ochre, carved into figurines carried as talismans, hunted not only for food, but honored as symbols of power, fertility, or mystery. They were more than prey. They were teachers, guiding humans through the vast wild, showing where water could be found when seasons were shifting, how survival itself was tied to the great pulse of life around them. In this interwoven relationship, humanity discovered humility, for without animals they could not endure, yet with them they found strength beyond their own. The story of Stone Age survival, therefore, is not the tale of man conquering beast, but of man learning to live alongside them, to fear, to respect, to depend, and eventually to befriend. And in that fragile bond, one can see the earliest glimmer of civilization, a whisper that survival was no longer only about human effort, but about partnership with the living world, a partnership that still defines us today. Across the long expanse of the Stone Age, humans were never entirely alone, for scattered bands and tribes, though separated by valleys, rivers, and mountains, slowly began to weave a delicate web of connection, one born from the simplest truth. Survival was easier when knowledge and goods were shared. In a world without roads, maps, or written words, trade was carried by footsteps across plains and forests, often risky, often uncertain, yet powerful in its consequences. At first, it was not trade in the sense we know today, but quiet exchanges. Stone for shells, ochre for food, a tool for a hide, objects that moved from one group to another, each carrying stories of distant lands, each a spark of connection in the darkness of isolation. Stay with this image, for soon I will reveal how these exchanges did more than feed and clothe. They carried ideas, language, even memory across vast distances, knitting together the first fragile fabric of human culture. Imagine a hunter on the edge of a river meeting a stranger from beyond the mountains, suspicion heavy in the air, weapons gripped tight, yet slowly, cautiously, trust forming through the offering of a sharpened flint in exchange for dried meat. That moment of exchange was more than survival. It was a step into cooperation, a recognition that even in a harsh world, alliance was possible. Over time, trade became more than necessity. It grew into ritual, with beads of bone, shells, and carved stones passed not for use but for meaning, tokens of friendship, markers of status, symbols of belonging. These objects, small though they were, represented the birth of economy, the faint outlines of a system that would eventually dominate human life. Yet here in its infancy,